And next up, we have Judge Robinson.
Well, I just first want to thank you for just including me on this panel. I feel quite honored and humbled because former Justice Katz and Judge Westbrook have so much more knowledge about the juvenile court and child welfare than I do. But maybe that's why I was included. I don't know quite as much about that part of it as they do. So in the 20 years that I spent as a Connecticut Superior Court judge, I did not do juvenile as an assignment regularly, although I did cover in juvenile court and had a brief tenure in juvenile court. And so I'm very familiar with the other aspects of the judicial system and how courts generally operate. And they operate very differently from the kind of system that you're going to go into, because in other parts of the system, one, we're dealing with adults, and so privacy and confidentiality are important between the attorney and the client, but they're not so important in terms of being a judge. You know, we do all of these things unless there's some special circumstances in the open, in public. And we also take a different kind of role in those kinds of cases. And so I don't think it's really an accident that 3 of the judges who were supposed to be on this program are retired, because judges are very constrained in what they can and should say about the juvenile court system, and they are required to have at least the aura of neutrality. And so, Josiah, I want to thank you for thinking that this is even important to talk about. And I have had the pleasure of having conversations with Jodie, and I hope we get to hear from some of her expertise, because she's really brilliant in this field. But I'm just going to give you a really brief follow-up to what Justice Katz just provided to you, which was a really wonderful summation of some of the issues that you're going to encounter. The thing that I find most exciting about the work you're doing is that you are in a position to serve the person and not just the need. And what I mean by that is my dog is trying to jump on my lap, so I forgive me if you see a little head pop up. So what I mean by that is it is actually your calling to see the child as a whole person, and this requires you to be self-reflective about your own biases and be self-reflective about the biases built into the system. And so when you actually are able to see the person and not just the needs, you know, it's not just the addicted parent, it's not just the traumatized child, there is a person there. You get to break through some of the, I think, weaknesses of our child welfare system, which is that it's very systematized. It's very impersonal, despite all of that we try to do. Told you. And so you are that connection that can create a safe zone. Just as Katz talked about a safety zone. That's the safe zone that you get to have because of the special relationship and responsibility that you're going to be taking on. And so I want to salute you for that, but I also want to challenge you that it's not enough for the good intentions to be activated. You all are on this call because you have good intentions. It's going to take some serious work, research, and effort. And I'm going to posit to you that one aspect of that work is on bias. Of course, that doesn't surprise anyone who knows me, because I do seem to talk a lot about the paradigms and the lenses that we bring to everything. But I think it's particularly important in the context of child welfare, because you may be treating and working with families who identity-wise are not as familiar to you, or who do not struggle with some of the life issues that you have. And even if you do share those in common, it's still good to check the bias. And so I want to leave you sort of on a historical note about how child welfare has changed so much. The first Black woman judge in the United States was Jane Matilda Bolin, and she was a judge in New York, and she was appointed in 1939 to the domestic court to preside over child welfare cases. And at that time, judges had a lot more power. And so one of the things that she actually did to start changing the system, because she was appointed in New York City, was to make sure that every child got assigned social workers regardless of race. Because up until that time, only social workers of color were assigned files of children of color. And that meant, because there weren't as many social workers, that the children of color waited longer. She also helped usher in this end that if you got grant money from the state or the locality, you had to accept all children. Now, we've come a long way from 1939, but not nearly long enough. And so I leave that historical sort of note to say we still have challenges in the child welfare realm, and many of them have to do with identity, and we have to face that. So that is my spiel, and I'm looking forward to having a further conversation with you.
Great. Thank you so much, Judge Robinson.